Hello and welcome to the Best Partnership Learning videos. This lesson is for higher level health and food technology and it's the third lesson in a series of nutrition lessons. As you watch the video, make sure that you're taking notes to use for your revision and pause and rewind as you need to. Today we're learning about micronutrients, specifically vitamins. And by the end of the lesson, you should be able to identify the food sources of both fat-soluble and water-soluble vitamins, and you should be able to explain the effects on health of having fat-soluble and water-soluble vitamins in the diet. To be able to explain effectively, you should give a detailed function of the vitamin and the consequence of having or not having the vitamin in the diet. Okay, so vitamins can be split into two sections. We've got fat-soluble and water-soluble. They're classified this way according to whether they're soluble in either fat or water. The water-soluble vitamins are vitamin C and the vitamin B group or vitamin B complex. There's more than one vitamin B, so that's why they're classed as a group. And the fat-soluble vitamins are vitamins A, D, E and K. A good way of remembering the difference between which are fat-soluble and which are water-soluble is with these pictures here. So the water-soluble vitamin, you can use the little song, "Oh, I do like to be beside the seaside." And if you think about the words in that, "Oh, I do like to be beside the seaside." So it's vitamin B group and vitamin C. And at the seaside, you get water. So that reminds me of the water-soluble vitamins, vitamin B group and vitamin C. The fat-soluble vitamins, I think about a deck chair, a D-E-E-K, a deck. Okay, so let's start with vitamin A. So vitamin A is required to make visual purple, which aids vision in dim light. That's one of its main functions. Now make sure in your answers that you give detailed functions like this. This is the difference between your knowledge at Nat 5 level and higher level. You have to be specific like I've been in these functions that I've given you here. Vitamin A is also used to keep the mucous membranes in the eyes, lung and digestive tract moist. It's one of the antioxidant vitamins that helps to prevent cancer and heart disease, and we'll go into more detail on antioxidant vitamins later in the series of lessons. Vitamin A is also important to maintain healthy skin and is needed for normal growth in children. The food sources of vitamin A include orange and red coloured fruit and vegetables like carrots and sweet potatoes, milk and oily fish like salmon and herring. So the impact on health, what is going to happen to us if we've either got this nutrient or we don't have this nutrient. So having enough vitamin A will improve vision in dim light because we've made our visual purple, and it decreases the risk of coronary heart disease and cancers because it's an antioxidant vitamin. Having too much vitamin A in pregnancy can be dangerous, so pregnant women are often advised to avoid too much vitamin A sources. Things like liver, for example, they're told not to have in their diet. Having a lack of vitamin A will increase your risk of infection because the mucous membranes aren't moist. It can lead to poor growth in children, poor vision in dim light because there's a lack of visual purple being produced, and an increased risk of coronary heart disease and cancers. Okay, so to explain fully, we have to be able to give a detailed function of the nutrient, which we've already done. We've covered those. So now we need to give the consequences to help us answer an explain question. So an adult has less vitamin A than required. What is the consequence for the adult? So what I want you to do is pause the video and have a think about this. Remember, we have to be specific to the person that we're focusing on here. So the consequence that I'm going to give you there is the adult will be at less risk of night blindness, which could be dangerous. The adult will be at risk of night blindness, which could be dangerous if they're driving in dim light. So that there is specific to an adult. The bold parts in my consequence there are my links to an adult. Moving on to the vitamin B complex. There are a number of different types of vitamin B within the vitamin B complex or vitamin B group, all of which have some features in common. A common function of the different types of vitamin B in the group is that they release energy from foods like carbohydrates and proteins. They're also needed for normal growth in children as well. Our sources are white and wholemeal bread, fortified breakfast cereal, so they're added to the breakfast cereal. They're not naturally found in there. And meat and offal like liver and kidney. The impact on health. So based on those functions that we've just covered, having enough vitamin B will provide energy for all bodily functions and activities because it's released effectively from the carbohydrate. A lack of vitamin B will result in tiredness because the energy won't be effectively released from the carbohydrate. Folic acid is another vitamin B. It's in the vitamin B complex. It's part of the vitamin B complex. It's also known as folate as well, so you might see it written as folate. So the functions of folic acid, it helps to reduce the risk of neural tube defects such as spina bifida in unborn babies. So women who are planning on becoming pregnant should take folic acid supplements 12 weeks before and 12 weeks after they fall pregnant. It's also required to form healthy red blood cells to prevent anemia. The sources of folic acid, it's found in dark green leafy vegetables such as Brussels sprouts, broccoli and spinach. It's in liver as well, and it's also in fortified breakfast cereals again. So the impact on health of having folic acid or not having enough folic acid in the diet. So having enough will prevent neural tube defects such as spina bifida in unborn babies. So it's important for pregnant women to have enough in their diet. And it results in the production of red blood cells, so you're at less risk of becoming anemic. Having a lack of folic acid will result in spina bifida in unborn babies, and it might mean that less red blood cells will be produced, which will result in anemia and tiredness. So to explain effectively, we need to give a detailed function of folic acid, which we've already covered, and now we need to give a consequence. So this consequence is linked to a pregnant woman. So what I want you to do is to pause the video and have a think about what your consequence would be related specifically to a pregnant woman. So a pregnant woman has less folic acid than required. What will the consequence be for that pregnant woman? Pause the video and think about what your consequences would be. So I'm going to give you two consequences linked to the pregnant woman. So having a lack of folic acid could result in the pregnant woman producing less red blood cells, increasing her risk of becoming anemic, which could result in her becoming tired. She will already feel fatigued from carrying the weight of the baby. So up until the point where I've said tired, if I hadn't added that extra bit in about the pregnant woman carrying the weight of the baby, it's a very general consequence. It doesn't link specifically to the pregnant woman. So I've had to add that part in to make it specific to the pregnant woman. If I'd taken that away, then I could say that consequence links to anybody at all. So you need to be very careful with that. Make sure you're linking clearly. The lack of folic acid 12 weeks before and after conception could result in the fetus developing a neural tube defect, so could be born with spina bifida. So that one is specific to a pregnant woman because it's talking about conception. Nobody else is going to become pregnant other than a pregnant woman. Moving on to vitamin C. The functions of vitamin C, it aids the absorption of iron, so it will prevent anemia. It helps prevent infections like colds and flus. It helps cuts and wounds to heal, and it's an antioxidant vitamin that helps prevent cancer and heart disease. Sources of vitamin C are citrus fruits like oranges and lemons, black currants, broccoli and Brussels sprouts, dark green leafy vegetables, and potatoes. The impact on health, having enough vitamin C will reduce the risk of coronary heart disease and cancers because it's an antioxidant vitamin, and it reduces the risk of infections like the cold. Having a lack of vitamin C will slow the healing of cuts and wounds, increase the risk of coronary heart disease and cancers, and increase the likelihood of infections. So this time our consequence, we want it to relate to a 5-year-old boy. A 5-year-old boy has less vitamin C than required. What will the consequence be for the 5-year-old boy? So I want you to pause the video just now and have a think about what your consequence would be for this question. So the lack of vitamin C could result in the 5-year-old boy getting a cold, as he would be more likely to pick up the infection at school. So if I didn't have the last part there, pick up the infection at school, it's very generalised and it could be true of anybody. Even though I'm saying the words 5-year-old boy, it's not specific to that person. So the fact that he's going to pick up the infection at school makes it a much clearer link to the person. If the 5-year-old boy falls and cuts himself whilst playing at school, the lack of vitamin C could result in his wounds taking longer to heal. So again, the link to playing at school is my link to the 5-year-old boy. Okay, vitamin D is also sometimes known as the sunshine vitamin. We can get it from the sun's ultraviolet rays. It must be present so that calcium is absorbed, and it acts with calcium and phosphorus to form strong bones and teeth. So I said it's found if it reacts with the skin from the sun's ultraviolet rays. That's a source of vitamin D, but our food sources are oily fish, egg yolk, and fortified breakfast cereals. It's added to breakfast cereals, it's not naturally present. Impact on health. Having enough vitamin D will reduce the risk of osteoporosis, which we'll cover in more detail later on in the course. And having a lack of vitamin D you would be more likely to break a bone. Your bones don't have a strong outer shell, and it increases the risk of osteoporosis. Okay, our consequence this time, we want to link to an elderly woman. So an elderly woman has less vitamin D than required. What will the consequence be for the elderly woman? So again, pause the video and have a little think about how you would make this link specifically to an elderly person. So the lack of vitamin D would lead to less calcium being absorbed, so it could increase the risk of osteoporosis for the elderly woman, which is common in elderly women. So the last part there is my link. It is common, it's a common disease for elderly women. Vitamin E. So vitamin E helps to maintain cell membranes, and it's one of the antioxidant vitamins that helps prevent cancer and heart disease. So that's vitamin A, C and E. We're all antioxidant vitamins, and I'll cover them in more detail later on in the course. Our sources of vitamin E are vegetable oils, nuts, margarine, eggs, and again, fortified breakfast cereals. Now, the one that we haven't covered here is vitamin K. Now, vitamin K is part of the fat-soluble vitamins, but it's not one that you have to know at a higher level. So, by now, having covered our lesson, we should be able to identify the food sources of both fat-soluble and water-soluble vitamins. So vitamin A, D, E and K, and vitamins B group and C. We should be able to identify where we would find these vitamins, what food sources we would find them in. You should be able to explain the effects on health of having fat-soluble or water-soluble vitamins in the diet. And to explain effectively, we should be able to give a full detailed function of each of the nutrients or the vitamins, and we should be able to give a consequence that matches that function as well as relating to the person that's going to be in our question when we come to do those questions. Just before you go, I'd like you to summarise what you've learned in today's lesson so that you can recap what we've covered. In our next lesson, we're going to be continuing our work of micronutrients, and we're going to be looking specifically at minerals.